for peace of mind, for justice. For the first day they wake up and don't immediately think of this. Beth Nissen, CNN, New York.
This is CNN.
The recovery begins in New York City, one step at a time. Schools do reopen today. The airport's on a limited basis. But the news is grim. The rescue work is also going on at a time when the medical examiner says he has 5,000 body bags in stock, but plans to order 5,000 more. On the investigative front, a man and his brother, suspected hijackers from Saudi Arabia, just two of the many suspects the government is zeroing in on this morning, 46 hours after terrorist attack the United States of America. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm Paula Zahn, reporting from New York.
And I'm Miles O'Brien from the CNN Center in Atlanta. Good morning to Paula, New York. I assume something
And Miles, we're going to start off this morning by talking about how the investigation is proceeding on a number of fronts. We go to Eileen O'Connor, who will help us understand what has transpired over the last 12 hours. Eileen, a bunch of men taken into custody, some of them released. What do we know at this hour?
Well, we know, Paula, that German police have in fact brought in for questioning a woman and an airport worker in Hamburg. Now, federal law enforcement authorities here were led to Hamburg to investigate that city because of links with two suspected hijackers. One is Mohammed Atta, the other one is Marwan al-Shaki. Now, both of those men, police were led to, law enforcement officials were led to, through a car that was seized at Logan Airport. It was a Mitsubishi. It was rented, a rental car, but it was rented by Mohammed Atta. And inside that car was some very helpful information, a flight training manual, and some documents. And of course, Atta, in doing a cross-check of his documents, it led him back to Florida and to a flight training school in Coral Springs, in Venice, at the airport in Venice, and to an address in Coral Springs. Police have been to that address. They have searched that address. They have also spoken to the head of that flight school and to another man who was a landlord for these two men for a few weeks. And so authorities have linked that car and these suspected hijackers. Again, also there is another linkage to another group of pilots. These were the men that went from Portland, Maine, and now police were led to them because of a car that they impounded in Portland, Maine. This led them to Adnan Bukhari and Amir Bukhari, and we have pictures of both of those men. Now, they were living in Vero Beach, Florida, which is also, and they were indicated, their records indicated that they had attended a flight school in Vero Beach, Flight Safety International. This, as you see, is a picture of Adnan Bukhari. His brother Amir lived across town. Now, next door to Adnan was a man named Amari, is the name we're getting, Al-Amari, and they are looking at him perhaps as another suspected hijacker, or perhaps law enforcement sources are telling me as a material witness. They are seeking that man. Now, these two brothers went to this Flight Safety International school, and again, as I said, they were linked to this car rented in Portland. Police believe that all these four men were the two sets of pilots that ended up flying those two flights out of Boston, the flights that actually went into the World Trade Center. Law enforcement authorities are looking at other flight schools in Florida, and they are looking there because they believe that other pilots were in fact trained at other flight schools in Florida, and are the ones that will be linked eventually to the Newark flight and to the Dulles flight. Now, they started looking at flight schools, obviously through those rental cars, but also because the authorities believed it took great skill to fly those planes into the World Trade Center towers, and also great skill to maneuver into the Pentagon. So right now they're back tracing all of these men's steps, and they also have leads on some other steps that some of the other hijackers may have taken. Paula?
All right, Eileen, you've described for us this morning the role that four of those pilots might play, or the set of brothers and the other pilots. There is a theory being debated right now based on what Attorney General John Ashcroft said yesterday, that each one of these planes had anywhere from 3 to 6 people on board involved with a hijacking. There is a theory that it's possible that a number of these men didn't even know each other, and that they waited on board before they were given some sort of signal to commandeer the jet. Can you provide any more information on that this morning?
Yes, I can. I've spoken to law enforcement investigators, some of the investigators, and they say they are looking increasingly at the likelihood that the two pilots would have known each other. But then when they got aboard these planes, that then there was another group of about 3 individuals who they did not know, who came from other cells, they are calling them. And those individuals then, through some signal, either it was those individuals who gave a signal to the pilots through some overt action, at which point everyone knew that they should get up and start their jobs, that they had all been tasked to individual jobs. They also, you know, Paula is saying they do have leads. They know that 2 men traveled through Bar Harbor, Maine, on the ferry from Nova Scotia. They're working with Canadian police on leads there. Law enforcement sources are also telling me that they believe there was a cell acting out of west of Boston for a year, looking into that. And again, you also have 3 people detained for questioning as material witnesses in Boston, hoping, they say, to get some leads through that. Paula?
Well, given, Eileen, everything you're telling us this morning, does that indicate then that the FBI and other federal agents actually were tracking the movements of these folks even before this happened?
We are not sure of that. They're now looking backwards and saying, and what we do have from some sources is that there may have been some indications, according to Time magazine, that as early as June, that that there were some indications of some kind of action, but it was so vague that they were not sure. As you know, at that time, we do know that the U.S. embassies were put on a heightened state of alert around the world. So again, these kinds of vague intelligence doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily specific enough to have led them to these men earlier. But right now they are, of course, backtracking, and they're picking up a lot of leads by looking at all of these men that they do know about and cross-checking their backgrounds and their documentation. And also, Paula, one thing we should point out that Atta and al-Sherhi possessed UAE passports, but we spoke to the United Arab Emirates officials in the government there, and they say that they were not citizens of the UAE. Now, also in Vero Beach, those Bukhari brothers possessed documents that showed they were Saudis. Paula?
All right, Eileen Connor, thanks for that wealth of information. We'll be checking on with you a little bit later on this morning. Back here in New York City, as I mentioned earlier on, the recovery begins one step at a time. The public schools are open today. They open 2 hours late to give teachers and counselors the time to discuss exactly how they are going to confront students with the reality of what has happened here in our city. At this moment, some 100 buildings have been damaged in the area surrounding the World Trade Center, and right now we're going to go to Michael Oku to give us an update on what rescue workers are finding this morning. Michael.
Good morning, Paula. Right now, the first thing on my mind is that this is a city in contrast. Just due north of me, you might not be able to see it from the cameras, of course, but just due north of me, New Yorkers are waking up to a rising sun, and it is a beautiful, beautiful sight. And yet behind me, a completely different story. This plume of smoke that has come to symbolize what has happened here, the total devastation, has become rather black, and it is moving due east, right up against the rising sun just east of this site towards Queens and part of Brooklyn. Rescue workers, of course, worked throughout the night. As of last night, 82 bodies, of course, were found. Rescue workers are telling us that they are finding actually more body parts than they're actually finding bodies. Of course, the number of those who have been found is expected to rise, and perhaps dramatically at some point today. Mayor Giuliani, as you mentioned at the top of the hour here, has asked for more body bags. He's asked the Federal Emergency Medical Management Agency for more than 6,000 body bags. And of course, there may be some additional requests as the day continues. Just outside of this ring here, along the West Side Highway due west of us, there are trucks lining up, waiting to take more of the bodies to various parts of the city. Pockets of fire inside the site right now behind us. You might not be able to see it because of the plume of smoke, which of course is like a pall that has descended over the city. Now, there is indication at some point today that there's been a strain on hospitals. Mayor Giuliani has stressed the fact that the city is prepared for this and people are working ceaselessly to try to attend to victims. But they do say that they need more clothes, that they need more beds for medical staff who have been working overnight to sleep on. And they certainly continue to ask for more blood. Paula?
So, Michael, before I let you go, I know you've had a chance to talk to rescue workers who have been in and out of there. What are they telling you about what they have seen?
Well, you can't use negative words too much for a story like this. It is absolutely gruesome. When I say that this plume of smoke is like a pall that's descended over the city, well, it's the rescue workers who are at ground zero seeing this. There's twisted metal, there is debris all over the street. There are basically inches of ash and soot, what appears to be ash and soot, which of course is just material and papers that have burned throughout the past 48 hours here. And they're saying that they're finding body parts. And again, more body parts than they're actually finding bodies. The interesting thing is what is going to happen tonight? How will the rescue workers be affected by what we expect is going to be a major weather change? It's a beautiful, clear day today, but we expect that we might get some rain tonight. Will that affect what they have to do? Will it actually cool down the fires that are inside that are making it so dangerous for the rescue workers to get even closer? Or will it completely make things more difficult for them, obscure their view and make it physically more uncomfortable? That remains to be seen. Paula.
Michael, thank you so much for that update. We have talked so much over the last 24 hours or so of what it is like for many families in New York City who are awaiting news, either confirmation that they've lost a family member or a status report on their medical condition if in fact they were successfully transferred to one of these local hospitals. Joining us now is a man who is in that very painful kind of limbo that is Chris Mills. Welcome.
Thank you.
Who are you missing?
My girlfriend, Danielle Kasoulis. She worked for Cantor Fitzgerald in the second tower of the Trade Center to fall. I had received a phone call a little bit before 9 o'clock that a plane had hit the Trade Center. At that time, I don't think anyone knew the severity of what had happened. I had immediately run out of the building. I was working in Midtown to try to call her. I tried her on her office phone. I couldn't reach them. By the time I had gotten out to the street, I had friends who were calling me, telling me they were seeing what was going on down there and trying to get a hold of Danielle. I made it about 2 blocks or so before I could actually see the Trade Center, and I got her on the cell phone, and they were on the 104th floor.
You actually established contact with her on the cell phone? I
was talking to her, my cell phone to her cell phone. She was with other people. I don't know how many other people. They were scared. They didn't know what to do. I don't think they were getting a lot of information at that time. They had broken a window out to get air into the space. There was smoke. We spoke for a little while. I wish I could remember more of that conversation myself right now.
Could you hear hysteria in the background? Could you hear anything other than her voice?
You could hear people. You could hear people running around. There was pandemonium. I mean, it was very hard. I was walking on the street. I was, I couldn't really tell you what I heard in the background. We had gotten off of the phone. I don't think they knew the severity of the issue either. She had wanted to call her parents. Other people wanted to use the cell phone. I continued to make my way down to the Trade Center. I think I made it within about 5 blocks of the Trade Center, and I saw the first tower go down. And at that point, I think everybody sat there for a second or so and in
Said,
disbelief.
"Oh my God."
And then after the shock, that instant of shock wore off, it was run for your life. I mean, there was debris, there was dust, there was a wall of dust basically following everybody running from that area. I made it to somewhere on the east side. I'm not even sure where I was. I continued to try to call her on the cell phone. Approximately 10:15, the phone rang and she picked up the phone. And they were still on the 104th floor, northwest corner.
Why? Were they trapped?
I don't know if they couldn't get out or they weren't getting any information. I can only guess that they couldn't get out.
What did she say at that point?
I mean, we talked we shared, some moments about, each other, and I think we were at that point. She didn't know the other building had collapsed. She didn't want to know. I didn't tell her. I said, get out, just get out of there, whatever you can do. At that point, they weren't sure if anyone knew they were up there. So again, either we lost contact or we got off the phone, and I spent the rest of the time running around trying to get in touch with FBI agents, telling people that, there are people up on the 104th floor. They don't know if anyone knows they're up there. They're not getting any contact. And that went on for about 15 minutes, and then I saw the second tower go down, and I haven't spoken to her since.
When you sat there, you had already watched one tower collapse, and you watched the second tower collapse. Did you give up hope at that point?
I don't think I gave up hope. I still did not give up hope. Still didn't. I don't know how I felt. I still don't know how I feel right now. I spent the rest of the day back in my office where I work, watching television, thinking. About 6 or 7 o'clock, people I work with said, "You know what? We're not doing any good sitting here. Let's go down and try to help out." So since 6 or 7 o'clock, Tuesday, I've been down there working with the rescue teams, just trying to do whatever we can to help out.
Thousands of people are in the same situation you're in this morning. What kind of contact have you had with city officials? What kind of counseling has anybody been given?
I don't know what counseling is offered. I personally, I don't think I've gone to look for counseling. I think my own counseling is just being down there and knowing that I'm trying to help other people. If I can help somebody else, I'm sure someone somewhere is trying to help Danielle. That's what makes me feel better right now. I can't really tell you how I feel.
As we leave you, Chris, one of the more poignant scenes last night were many people like you who had tried so hard to go down to this area to offer their help to rescue workers. And there was a spontaneous, almost an act of celebration where people were cheering on the rescue workers. They have taken such enormous risks to go in and try to find people like your girlfriend.
I drove down the West Side Highway and there were people cheering, and it just, I think it rose everybody, it elevated everybody's spirits at that time. And there's some fine people down there, the finest people I've ever seen trying to help. And that's all I can say about everybody right now.
Well, our thoughts are with you. None of us has any idea of what it must feel like to be in the situation you're in. Thank you very much for joining us at such a painful time of your family's life. We wish you luck. Miles, before I hand it back to you in Atlanta, I just wanted to quickly bring our audience up to date on some of the other changes in New York City. You might have seen scrolled across the screen that limited airport service will resume today at the 3 major airports here in New York City. But what we are being told is the first thing is going to happen is the flights that were diverted from New York, most of those going to Canada, will be the first flights to arrive here today. All of the businesses south of 14th Street, which is about 20-odd blocks away from here, will continue to be closed. Most of the bridges are open today. Subway service is all but back up to service except in some sections of southern Manhattan. So once again, Miles, it is a very slow process of New Yorkers getting back to probably what will never again be a normal existence.
All right. Thank you very much, Paula. Let's turn it over now to one of our affiliate reporters with WABC, Lisa Quintana, is at LaGuardia Airport, where some service is now resuming. Lisa, is it still on a limited basis?
Oh, not even that. As of yet, there has been no air activity. Now, the airport here, LaGuardia, did reopen at 6 o'clock in the morning. Behind me, you'll see airport employees, you'll see airport passengers back there. But if we walk over here, you'll see that the security checkpoint that leads to the airport gates, well, that railing is still down. So as of yet, no flights have come in, no flights have gone out. However, passengers are here. There's a sense of confusion. There's a sense of concern. We were told to tell the passengers you should call your airline ahead. You have to rebook your flight. But I spoke to one woman, and she did call her airline ahead, and they told her flight would be leaving at 7 in the morning. She's still here. That flight hasn't left. So that gives you an idea of what today is going to be like. It is going to be far from normal. If you do call ahead, if you do come to the airport, you have to be very patient. Like I said, it'll be a far from normal day. Again, a lot of security changes, no curbside check-in, movement inside the terminal will be restricted. They only want ticketed passengers inside here. They don't want people to meet and greet people who are arriving on these planes. So again, changes. Give yourself extra time. Be prepared for the new security procedures. We're live from LaGuardia Airport. I'll give it back to you.
Lisa, before you get away, just give us a sense of how many flights are scheduled right now. Are you getting information from the airlines? Are those monitors giving you some indication as to how many flights may be coming in or out?
Well, I mean, I called American Airlines. We're in the American Airlines terminal, and right now they don't have any scheduled service to leave here today. She says at the earliest it'll be late tonight. If you look at that television screen over there that lists the flights that come in and out, they all read canceled. I also spoke to United Airlines, the representative from that airlines. They had hoped that diverted flights would be able to leave early this morning. That hasn't happened. They had hoped that scheduled flights would be able to leave as early as noon. We're still going to have to wait and see if that will happen as well.
Lisa Quintana is with our affiliate WABC, joining us from LaGuardia Airport. Thanks for being with us this morning. We should point out Reagan National Airport, Dulles Airport in Washington, still not open. No indication as to when they will resume service. This unprecedented grounding of aviation in the United States continuing, but slowly but surely we're headed toward an emergence of air travel once again in the United States. Let's move it down to Washington, where we're told President Bush is at work in the Oval Office, beginning his day, once again considering the possibilities for a response in the wake of this unprecedented attack. Over at the Pentagon, a very visible sign of that. CNN's Bob Franken standing by in front of the Pentagon as the efforts there continue to pick through the debris and begin an investigation. Bob.
Well, Miles, there's a double emphasis here. There's an emphasis, of course, in trying to return to a normal setup in about a little over a half hour. Normal business hours will begin, and all the people who work here are expected to show up. At the same time, of course, there is the effort to try and find the fallen comrades who were a result of this horrible collision between the airplane and the Pentagon a couple of days ago. And the search and rescue effort now goes on day and night. We have seen some of the bodies being taken out. We have not gotten any casualty figures, nor has the Pentagon given us any estimate about how many people they will ultimately find died in the building. We're told that there are between 150 and 200 who are unaccounted for, including those who were on the airplane, but the search goes on. And it's a search that is being conducted to a large degree by the Fairfax County Urban Rescue Unit, which is a unit from nearby, but it is a unit we've seen around the world. We saw them in Oklahoma City with their dogs. We saw them in Turkey in the earthquakes, and now we're seeing them close to home. And the person who is involved in this rescue, who spent quite a bit of time inside the darkness, says it's horrible.
There is a lot of damage, more damage than I've seen before. It must have been like a furnace inside. The concrete holds the heat. The heat was there for a long time. Some areas you can still feel some of the heat. There's a desk, computers, ceiling tiles that have fallen down, wires everywhere, chairs, and a lot of very burned out areas. It must have been like hell in there.
Lieutenant Craig Lukey says they have come upon some bodies, they have not come upon survivors, but they continue to look. Meanwhile, the American flag has been draped over the damaged part of this building right next to it, and in any case, a sign of hope, a sign of a desire to get back to normal operations here, normal, Miles, but things will never be the same. Miles?
A bit more about normal operations. Employees at the Pentagon are reporting for duty this morning, are they not? And we're not just talking about bare bones personnel.
We're talking about everybody, and of course that raises the obvious question, where will those go who were assigned to the many offices that have been damaged or are unusable? And the answer is they are to report for work. They will be assigned facilities. They'll get back to the business at hand here. And of course, as we all know, one of the most important facets of that will be planning military operations that ultimately might be used in retaliation for what was done here and what was done in New York and what was done to the United States.
CNN's Bob Franken at the Pentagon for us this morning. Across the river, across the Potomac, we go to Congress, where some lawmakers are talking about just that. A resolution of resolve, perhaps. It would support the use of military force, perhaps to respond to Tuesday's terrorist attacks. Congressional leaders are negotiating with the White House on the exact language of all this. They hope to come to some agreement later today. More on this from our congressional correspondent, Kate Snow, who is on Capitol Hill. Kate, what is the discussion here? Is there a debate over the resolution?
There is. We understand from sources, Miles, that this debate was started by the White House requesting that Congress take a look at some sort of use of force resolution, some sort of resolution that would outline or allow some latitude for the president in the case that the president and the administration decide that force is warranted. This is something that's been done before. Similar measures were passed during the Vietnam War and during the Persian Gulf. Now, it is very much in a state of flux. It's being negotiated. We understand more meetings scheduled today between congressional negotiators and the White House on that front. On another front, the Congress probably will take up today a bill, a spending bill, an emergency spending bill, and that would provide some money up front for some of the things that are needed right away. Emergency spending that would give the administration money for rescue, for repairs, also for counterterrorism efforts. That effort, we understand from the House Appropriations Chairman, could be with a price tag of about $20 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars, although that's still a little bit in flux as well. Late last night we were told that the figure would be $20 billion and that the bill would outline things that this money could be spent on, and that's anti-terrorism efforts, increasing transit security, repairing public facilities, and supporting national security. Within those broad categories, Miles, the president would then have latitude to spend the money as the administration sees fit, to move money around. This would just be a first step, I'm told by sources here on Capitol Hill. This would be one of perhaps several bills down the road, but a first step to at least initially give the president some money that obviously is much needed at this critical time. Miles?
Kate, clearly we're in uncharted territory here, but we're talking about a declaration of war against whom?
Well, we're talking about, we have to be very careful with the language. What's being discussed is a resolution supporting the use of military force, and the language is very careful, and it's being negotiated now. There's been a lot of talk about should there be a declaration of war, and that very question that you just raised is the one that's been raised all over Capitol Hill. If you did a declaration of war, who would you declare war against? It doesn't fit any of the previous models. It doesn't fit the War Powers Act. So there's a lot of talk, a lot of discussion, and just to reemphasize, it's a fluid discussion, and no decision's been made about any resolution, but that's the effort. The White House would like to see some resolution put up that the Congress could vote on, just to give the president some much-needed backing.
How quickly are we likely to see that vote, Kate?
One source told us last night, this could take days, so we don't know. We know that they're in meetings again today. We do know on the funding front that I just mentioned, the $20 billion appropriations bill, emergency spending bill, if you will, that's likely to come up today. Miles, they want to get that to the president by today.
All right, CNN's Kate Snow on Capitol Hill. We should tell our viewers at 7:35 Eastern Time, about 7 minutes from now, we will hear from the Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft, a live interview here on CNN. Stay with us for that. Let's go back to Paula in New York.
All right, Miles, right now we want to give you a better idea of exactly what is going on in that area where rescue workers are very slowly being able to move ahead on their efforts to get into the area where the two World Trade Centers collapsed. Here you see the extent of the damage. We are hearing from our correspondents on the scene that rescue workers, many of whom have seen things that none of the rest of us ever want to see, can't even describe what they are witnessing down there now. We are told that some 100 buildings in the surrounding area have been damaged. There was a report last night that a 54-story building was about to collapse. We have now confirmed through the building management of that building that is not true. So that's one ray of good news here. But the grim news continues to pile up. The medical examiner here in New York City says he has some 500 body bags in stock. He plans to order at least 5,000 more. The mayor now confirming at least 80 dead. You add that to the several hundred killed on the hijacked airliners. We are talking about a death toll that will be very, very high. Mayor Giuliani is expected to join us sometime within the next hour, and we're hoping to get a better idea of exactly what is going on in that rescue area, how the triage areas are reacting. Once again, life here slowly resuming, and you can't call it a normal pace, but people at least attempting to get back to their lives. The area airports are open on a limited basis, public schools open, but opening late to allow teachers and counselors a chance to strategize about exactly what they will tell their students today. Right now, we want to share with you a story that Natalie Pavelski put together, where she talks with some of the family members who lost their loved ones on 3 of the hijacked airplanes. Let's listen.
In Burlington, Vermont, a special mass as a bishop grieves the death of his brother, David Angel, executive producer of the show Frasier on NBC. He died with his wife, Lynn, when their plane crashed into the World Trade Center.
He brought, and I think that's how we want to remember him. He truly did, and what a wonderful thing that is, to make people laugh, and he did that, did it so well.
On the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, 31-year-old Mark Bingham, a public relations executive, on his way home to San Francisco. He managed to call his mother on an airphone minutes before United Flight 93 slammed into farmland.
He said, "I want to let you know that I love you."
And in California, another mother remembers her only son, 38-year-old Tim Ward, who worked for the Rubio's restaurant chain. He'd been visiting his girlfriend in Boston and was on his way home.
Just pray for all the people that are hurting and all the families, and pray that our country will do something to stop this terrorist.
One more grieving mother, one of thousands, whose individual grief symbolizes a nation's profound sorrow. Natalie Pavelski, CNN.
And we're back here in New York City, where I am joined by Tim Chung, a man who is very lucky to be alive this morning. Welcome. You were in the first tower that was hit. Describe to us what happened.
That is correct. I was in my office on the 64th floor, and it began like an ordinary day. I got up to look at the fax machine and answer some voicemail, and then I got up to go get some breakfast. And all of a sudden, we heard and you felt this tremendous crash, which came from the north side of the building. The building rocked like you were on a ship, and it swayed back and forth a couple of times. And I remember just standing there thinking, I think this could be it. When it stopped swaying, we all started yelling and telling people to go to the center core of the building, which is supposed to be the safe area of the building, as well as where the stairways are. From there, we made our way down the stairways, and it was pretty easy going, all the way down to about 40 or so, and that's about where it started to back up. It started to get just gridlocked with so many people there.
Were people panicking at that point?
People were absolutely terrific. They were helping each other. They were supportive of each other. People were talking to each other, making sure everyone was okay. And it was just real easy going to that point. No traffic. It just kept moving along, and people kept entering.
Had any of these people been through the 93 World Trade Center bombing? Because if they had, one would not have expected that kind of calm.
Right. I think some of them probably had been. I had been there in 93, and I remember the darkness and the smoke and the soot. But this time the lights worked terrifically. Again, people were under real good control. When we got to about 38, it slowed down, and that was giving also an opportunity for the firefighters to walk up the stairs and also to bring some injured people down the stairs. And that's, I think, kind of slowed the process up.
You were already seeing injured people being taken out of the building at that point?
That is correct.
That had to be pretty scary.
It all was very scary. I can't tell you all the emotions that run through a person or ran through me during that time period. I also remember each and every one of the firemen who were walking up into the crisis, and we were walking away from the crisis. And I remember people thanking them, telling them how much we appreciated them being there, and just applauding them as they were walking up, 80 flights of stairs.
God bless them. I guess that's
Absolutely.
the one part of this story that has hit such a raw nerve in New York City now that we know we have lost over 250 firefighters here, including the fire chief and the deputy fire chief. Right. So you're watching the firefighters go up.
That's
How long
correct.
did it take you to get down from that 30 range to the bottom?
It took probably another perhaps 45 minutes to an hour. As I said, going was very slow. We tried to move as best as we could. We got down to about the 6th floor, and it stopped again. And then at that point, we heard rumbling. I mean, it was a thunderous rumble, and the building started to shake. And I think we all thought that the building was coming down right on top of us. At that point, we started to run. Water began pouring into the stairways, and we were walking through maybe 6 or 8 inches of water at that point. Smoke started coming up from the bottom. We finally started to get out. The lights went out. Luckily, people had some flashlights. We did get out to the mezzanine level, which was one level above the lobby level, and we walked out, and you couldn't recognize it, mostly because you couldn't see anything. The smoke was so thick. The soot was flying.
So you suspected then the second rumbling perhaps was a bomb going off or a secondary attack? You at that point had no idea what was going on.
At that point, we had no idea, and emergency personnel were along the way, and they kept telling us, keep coming, keep walking, and walk away from the building, get away from the building as quickly as you can. And we kept walking, we kept stumbling, we kept walking over debris, steel, rebar, aluminum ducting, everything was out there. And we did make our way away from the building. I tried looking back, and you really couldn't see the second tower because of all the smoke. I could see the first tower because I could see the antenna, and I knew that was the building that I had come from. We did get away from the building, and about, I'd say, 2 to 3 blocks away at the most, people started running and screaming again, and we turned around to look, and I could see World Trade Center 1's antenna begin to sink down, which told me that the building was going down.
Then one would expect you ran even faster.
We did run even faster, actually, and we were so exhausted by that time. We had walked down 64 flights of stairs. We were running for blocks at that point, and just people were just all over, just running away, but also helping each other along the way, picking up people who had stopped to rest, picking up people who had fallen down, just making sure everyone else was okay.
There's such terrifying stories about how people were trying to seek some sort of cover under vans that were parked in the area. Your instinct was to run, run, run.
That's right.
Is that what saved your life?
Yeah. Paul, I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure what saved my life, because it was a really terrifying experience. But I thank all the people who were there to help us. I thank my fellow office mates and everyone there who offered assistance. And I know my heart goes out to them because, when they talk about the bravest of the brave, they really are the bravest of the brave.
Tim Chung, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. And we wish you the best as you try to find some sense of, not normalcy, but some new pattern to your life.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Miles, what you've just heard Tim say is a sentiment that is expressed over and over again here. I told you last night there was a spontaneous celebration downtown of folks like my previous guest, many of whom are missing family members that have gone down in the area to cheer on the rescue workers. And once again, The fact that New York has confirmed that the city has lost over 250 firefighters and over 80 police officers has hit the city very hard. People want those firefighters' family members to know how much respect they have for what they tried to do here in New York City.
Hey, what struck me the most in that interview is that for 40 stories there was gridlock, as he described it, and yet no panic.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable because Tim isn't the only one that has told us that story. I guess there is a certain strength that sometimes reveals itself in these times of crisis, but I guess people across the country should be giving these New Yorkers a great deal of credit for dealing with unimaginable circumstances.
All right, it's all we have to hang on to this morning for now anyhow. Paula Zahn in New York. We'll be back to her in just a moment. Let me bring you up to date on the investigation with a quick recap. It is an unprecedented law enforcement investigation spanning all locations, Boston, Florida, Hamburg, Germany. Police and law enforcement sources are telling CNN 2 brothers suspected in the hijackings lived in Vero Beach, Florida up until very recently. They apparently trained at the Flight Safety International Flight Academy. Adnan Bukhari, his brother Amir Abbas Bukhari, there. Their homes have been searched there. In addition, 2 others are linked to a flight school on the other coast, Venice, Florida. Mohammed Atta and Marwan Youssef Al-Sihi. They have been linked to an apartment in Hamburg, Germany, and there are searches underway there as well as in Venice, Florida. They were at the Huffman Flight Academy there, apparently learning how to fly. Investigators hope also to recover the cockpit voice recorder from the wreckage of United Airlines Flight 93. The plane was hijacked and went down Tuesday in rural Pennsylvania, not long after the crashes at the World Trade Center and at the Pentagon. It was bound for Washington by radar track accounts that we've had. There are some reports the White House might have been the target of that particular flight, perhaps Camp David, perhaps Air Force One. It is not known. Phone calls from several passengers on board that flight indicate there was a decision to attack the terrorists on board. The passengers on that particular plane were made aware of the fact that a previous plane had struck the World Trade Center, and subsequent to that decision, relayed to family members on the ground, this plane crashed into a farmer's field in rural Pennsylvania. Law enforcement sources are telling CNN as many as 50 people may have helped plan and carry out Tuesday's attacks, and all obviously very well coordinated. The number of victims, of course, will total into the thousands. We are keeping tabs on all this for you. Paula.
Thanks so much, Miles. Right now, we are checking in with Attorney General John Ashcroft, who joins us from Washington. Welcome, sir. We appreciate your joining us this morning.
Good morning, Paula.
Are there any arrests near?
We are pursuing a great many leads. We are developing information. I'm not going to comment on whether or not arrests are imminent. We wouldn't want to compromise any of the activities, but I can tell you that the 4,000 special agents of the FBI, the offices of U.S. attorneys and the FBI around the world are pursuing constructively leads. We have not only the 4,000 agents, but 3,000 support personnel for them, and then additional scientists and lab technicians who are already hard at work in this matter.
All right, we have been reporting for 12 hours now that the FBI took several men into custody yesterday. How critical is that information those men have given your agents to some ultimate arrests?
Well, very frankly, we're attentive to all the evidence that's available to us. We're pursuing a variety of leads. We're not going to comment on specific evidence that might be available from any particular sources. We feel like we're making progress. We know that between 3 and 6 individuals on each of the hijacked airplanes were involved. We know that they were trained and technically proficient, that they were trained in the United States to fly, some of them at least, to fly these airplanes, and they flew them with deadly accuracy. These were acts of war, and we're very, very methodical, and we're going to be complete about developing an understanding, and as soon as we have the capacity to bring to justice people who are associated with this as ground support for these operations, we're going to do that. We have as a major priority the development of the understanding and the apprehension of those involved in this crime and in this act of war against the United States, and we're going to act aggressively. We're also going to act aggressively, though, to protect the safety of America's traveling public and to get our airline industry back in the sky. And that's why we've, in the Justice Department, have coordinated efforts with the Department of Treasury and Customs agents, Immigration and Naturalization Service, Border Patrol officers, U.S. Marshals are going to, by the hundreds, help secure both the airports and the air traffic in the United States to help make sure the traveling public has a basis for knowing that the skies will be safe.
Mr. Ashcroft, I want to come back to a point you made earlier on, confirming the fact that four of these hijackers, or each of the four terrorist teams, had certified pilots on board. You confirmed the fact that some of them were trained in the United States. Time magazine is reporting today that some of these pilots had flown for an airline in Saudi Arabia. Do you know if those pilots were trained in the U.S. or, in fact, in Saudi Arabia?
I'm not prepared to comment on the Time article.
And why is that, sir?
Well, there are certain things that we want to say or wouldn't want to say about various pieces of evidence and leads which we are undertaking, and it's not our intention to do anything that would compromise either the kind of intelligence we receive in this case or the kind of progress we might make in apprehending these perpetrators of these acts of war.
All right, CNN is also being told by sources it is possible that members of each of the hijacking team may not even have known each other prior to commandeering the jets, and that perhaps they waited on board for signals from somebody somewhere else to tell them what to do. Can you confirm that is true this morning?
No, I'm not prepared to comment on that kind of allegation.
Is it anywhere close to being accurate?
I'm not prepared to comment on that kind of allegation.
All right, let's move on to something else. There is a feeling among some Americans as they watch how successfully you've been able to turn up information on some of these suspects over the last 24 hours or so, and they're saying, you know, why couldn't anybody have stopped these guys? What do you tell them this morning?
Well, I can tell them that we did not have any information that these kinds of attacks were going to take place, and that, frankly, this is a big country with lots of space for people who then, if they come together in a concentrated way and then don't care about their identity because they're going to perish in the crime, may leave evidence that otherwise would not have been as clearly available. This is a unique perpetration of acts of war in a very criminal sense, but those who perpetrated these acts understood that their own involvement would end their lives. So we don't have the normal setting where people who commit the crimes are not a part of, and normally we try to use information from them and what they do after their criminal acts to put the story together. That's not a part of our capacity in this setting.
I respect how cautious you have to be about what kind of intelligence information you're going to share and what not. Are you able to tell us this morning if your investigation has led you towards any one responsible party?
I'm not able to identify any one responsible party for you today. I would say that we are making progress in this investigation and following and developing an understanding of the kinds of associations that the individuals who perpetrated these acts of war had.
Mr. Attorney General, one last question for you this morning. The President yesterday said that the United States government will spend what it takes to not only clean up the horrible destruction in Washington and New York, but also to combat terrorism. Are you confident that Congress is going to give you the funds that you think you need to, in fact, combat terrorism, so this won't happen again?
Well, I believe that the entire nation is united here. I've talked to members of the Congress. I've heard them speak, members of both parties. This is one of those situations where Americans set aside other things that might divide us. And we are, I think, conspicuously and appropriately united in this setting. And I believe that the members of Congress will act in good faith to work with the administration here to make sure that the public can be assured of its safety and security to every extent possible. We obviously want this country to be back at the business freely as the kind of culture we ought to be, as a leading culture of freedom in the world. And we don't believe that the kinds of costs associated with that are beyond what we should undertake. We're going to get that done.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you very much for joining us on CNN this morning. We very much appreciate your time. And right now we're going to head back to Atlanta, where Miles O'Brien is standing by. Good morning again.
Good morning again, Paula. Let's take a look at some pictures, lower Manhattan, as the efforts continue to salvage and perhaps, hope against hope, maybe find somebody still alive under the rubble now, 47 hours after the first attack on the World Trade Center. The dust literally has yet to clear. 3,000 tons of rubble were carted away from that site by boat to a garbage dump in Staten Island just yesterday. A quiet, sickeningly quiet morning once again in New York as the smoke continues to rise off of what was the World Trade Center. Casualty numbers are, quite frankly, appear to be staggering. There are requests now, we are told, for in excess of 10,000 body bags. The numbers that we do know, 200 firefighters are missing, 154 workers from the Port Authority missing, 57 New York police officers and Port Authority officers missing, 38 members of a Manhattan management company missing, and then at the Pentagon as well, 150 unaccounted for there. The numbers will continue to rise. Meanwhile, hospitals all around New York, medical personnel are taxed trying to take care of severely injured people, many of them burned, many of them facing severe trauma. Brian Palmer is at St. Vincent's Hospital. Brian.
Good morning, Miles. We are indeed in front of St. Vincent's. You can see the streets behind us are actually quite quiet. There was an auxiliary police officer was just brought in a few minutes ago with respiratory problems. About 453 people have been through the ER at St. Vincent's, 263 at affiliated hospitals in the outer boroughs. Not the numbers that they were expecting, not the numbers that they were hoping. Now, 4 people who were pulled from the rubble yesterday were actually brought to Bellevue Hospital, but most, in fact, according to the hospital spokesman, all of the emergency services personnel were brought here to St. Vincent's. St. Vincent's will most likely emerge as the trauma center, pretty much the main trauma center in Manhattan, north of the blast zone, because of the state of emergency announced by Mayor Giuliani last night. From 14th Street north to the southern tip of Manhattan, this is a frozen zone. Authorized vehicles, police vehicles, emergency vehicles only, and whatever vehicles get permission from the police department. Now, hospital spokesman also repeated the mayor's announcement last night that a citywide patient services center is being set up at the Lexington Avenue Armory, which is on the east side of Manhattan, where people can come to file missing persons reports. And it's also going to be a clearinghouse. There will be grief counselors on site. Miles?
Brian, do you have any sense how many patients at these hospitals might in fact be unidentified right now? There are a lot of families obviously trying to be reunited with people who they think might be injured and under the care of one of these hospitals.
Miles, there's not a lot of information of that level of specificity coming out. What people are suggesting is that they do contact the authorities, and I think the citywide patient services facility is going to be functioning, and people will be able to go to that center and also call to get that kind of information.
And one of the things, that fatigue has got to be setting in among the medical personnel, obviously way overtaxed. Are they getting enough support from other hospitals, other areas to get them through this?
Well, Miles, it's sort of astounding because we've been, all of us around here have been up around the clock collecting information, but these people are actually treating the injured, and it's truly phenomenal. There are volunteers coming from all over the country. We've ran into people from as far south as Texas, people from Massachusetts. So folks are being spelled, they are being relieved, but I think they are being pretty overburdened. Now here at St. Vincent's, the onslaught of injured people that they braced for did not come, which is not a great sign. It leads people to believe that perhaps they're not a lot more, there just aren't tremendous numbers of injured, and that they may be pulling more bodies out of the blast site. Miles?
CNN's Brian Palmer at St. Vincent Hospital in New York. Thank you very much for your time. Let's turn it now to the White House. CNN's Kelly Wallace on the North Lawn with word that the nation's air traffic, the nation's airport, might be on their way to some resumption of normalcy. Kelly.
Well, Miles, yes, I was just handed a statement coming from the Transportation Secretary, Norman Mineta. Here's what we can tell you. The Secretary has ordered the national airspace system reopened to commercial and private aviation effective 11 a.m. Eastern Time today. Now, that's for commercial and private aviation. That's the airspace system. The Secretary saying, though, that decisions about reopening airports will be made on a case-by-case basis. So, again, for people listening, sitting out there at home, each individual airport decisions being made on a case-by-case basis, but overall the national airspace system open for commercial and private traffic. Decisions, though, made for individual airspace, individual airports. Secretary Mineta saying this decision made after a series of meetings throughout the day and into last night. Secretary also saying that anyone planning on flying should check with the airline regarding the level of service and flight schedules, and to be sure to allow plenty of time to deal with the new security procedures. As CNN has reported all throughout the day yesterday, the Secretary ordering new security guidelines in place. Some of those guidelines include an end to curbside checking, many more searches going on of passengers and of luggage, and also, as we know, no knives allowed to be transported onto planes. That's the latest from here. Miles, back to you.
Kelly, is it safe to presume then, if Mr. Mineta is issuing this, that all airports have basically indicated they're complying with the new rules?
Well, I don't want to go too far here, Miles, to be perfectly frank and honest. Just handed this information. Obviously, an FAA has issued a directive yesterday calling on all the nation's airports to impose new security guidelines. And until airports adhere and implement those guidelines, they are not able to reopen. So you can be assured, according to the federal government, that if any airports go ahead and open up for operations, that they will have those new guidelines and new security measures in place. Miles?
All right, CNN's Kelly Wallace at the White House. Let's head across the Potomac River to CNN's Patty Davis, who is at Ronald Reagan National Airport. Patty, it's hard to even describe the kind of logjam which has been created by this unprecedented grounding now for nearly 48 hours now, and it will extend beyond 48 hours. Any sense from the airlines there as to how long it will take to get things back to normal levels of flow?
Well, that's a really good question here, and that's something that the airport authority is having to deal with. As far as this airport, in terms of being ready, it says it is ready, but having their announcement coming out earlier, before the announcement from the Department of Transportation that the airspace would be open today. Earlier today, Washington Reagan Airport had said that it would not be reopening for flights today. Now, that may change, being that the national airspace, it appears, has been reopened at about 11 a.m. this morning. But right now, it is a virtual ghost town here at this airport. Plane after plane sitting on the tarmac. Inside, also, the airport, virtually nobody, only janitors, a few workers for the airlines as well. As for Dulles Airport, it is unlikely. The airport authority says that there will be flights operating there until late this afternoon, if at all. Of course, that could change now that the airspace is reopening. Up to now, only flights that had been diverted were allowed to get into the skies. And in terms of when passengers, or what passengers should be expecting once they do come back to the airports, here's what one of the airline passenger groups had to say.
The effect on airline passengers is going to be quite significant. You know, the old days where you could get to the airport at the last minute and, you know, run through to the counter and the gate and get on the airplane, those days are gone. It's going to be a very long, slow process to get through multiple layers of security.
Now, New York airports, Newark, JFK, LaGuardia, also indicating that they are absolutely ready to accept passengers. They said that was depending on what the FAA did. It now appears that DOT has decided that it will reopen the airspace at 11 o'clock. Miles?
All right, Patty, I think it's worth recapping for people who may be contemplating getting on a flight soon exactly what they might expect when they come to an airport.
Well, at the airports across the nation, heightened security. There are a lot more police officers there. Also, you cannot bring any knives of any kind on board any of these airplanes at all. We're talking even those pocket knives. You cannot do curbside check-ins here at the airport. You cannot check in off-site. You cannot, if you have an e-ticket, you cannot go directly to the gate. The FAA is requiring that everybody, even if you have a hard ticket, perhaps your travel agent issued you a boarding pass, everybody, all those passengers required to go to the gate, to the ticket counter to actually check in, physically check in. So it's going to be a longer process checking in. It's going to be a little bit more frustrating for passengers as they come to the airports today, perhaps through the rest of the week. But these security measures, these heightened security measures now in place. Miles?
CNN's Patty Davis at Ronald Reagan National Airport in Washington. Let's turn it now to Bonnie Anderson, who is at Hartsfield Airport, the second busiest airport in the world, Atlanta, Georgia. Bonnie, what's the scene there?
Well, Miles, as you know, on any given day, on any normal day, at this time of the morning, Hartsfield would be a bustling hub of activity. Not so today. I can show you that there's tape across the doors. There's very little activity here, very little movement, very few employees. And there's still no word from officials here on when the airport will reopen, whether they'll go along with the 11 a.m. Timeline. Delta, which is headquartered here, says later today they will decide when to resume their flights. We can show you some live pictures now of planes on the tarmac. They have been there since Tuesday. Meanwhile, officials here are implementing new security measures mandated by the FAA. I can tell you that on Tuesday, police officers and bomb-sniffing dogs combed every inch, they said every inch of this airport. Additional federal marshals, customs, and border patrol agents assigned to Hartsfield should be arriving today, we're told, as they have been dispatched to major airports across the nation. This is certainly a major airport. There has been a perennial battle with O'Hare International over the bragging rights to the title for world's busiest airport. Now, Atlanta Police Department says they have also permanently assigned additional officers to this airport, although Hartsfield already has a very sophisticated, what they call, multi-layered security system. Most of this was put in place prior to the '96 Olympics held here in Atlanta. Additionally, last year, some very high-tech electronic scanning devices were installed in the concourses. As for stranded passengers, well, the number is undisclosed. Some of them were stranded as they were coming through Atlanta, major hub, in the midst of changing planes. Others were stranded when their flights aimed for another destination were stopped here. So those passengers, along with employees, are awaiting word as to when flights will resume here at Hartsfield. I'm Bonnie Anderson, CNN, reporting live from Atlanta.
All right, thank you very much, Bonnie. Our continuing coverage, America Under Attack, will resume in just one moment.
This is CNN.
This is what the southern part of New York City looks like today. What we can't capture with this picture, of course, is what this place smells like today. The winds have shifted here, blowing stinging smoke miles away from the crash site at the World Trade Center. The rescue work continues with some grim reminders of what the reality is today. The medical examiner confirming he now has 5,000 body bags in his premises, with another 5,000 body bags ordered and on the way. But rescue workers certainly are not giving up hope of finding more victims trapped in the rubble of the World Trade Center. Good morning, everybody. I'm Paula Zahn reporting for CNN from New York City this morning. And Miles O'Brien will be joining us from Atlanta in a moment. But first, I'm going to check in with Eileen O'Connor, who gave us some fascinating new information just about an hour ago on where the investigation is going now. Eileen, if you want to recap some of that and tell us anything new you've learned, we'd appreciate that.
Well, we have learned that some new information about the Bukhari brothers, but let's first start in Germany, in Hamburg. German police tell CNN they have detained a male airport worker and have brought in a woman for questioning in connection with Tuesday's attack. Now, federal law enforcement in the United States was led to this Hamburg connection by way of information that was gleaned from a car seized at Logan Airport. It was a Mitsubishi, and it was rented by Mohammed Atta, who was, and inside that was a flight manual, an Arabic language manual that sources say was very helpful. Also seized, Atta's driving records indicated that he lived here at 10001 West Atlantic Boulevard in Coral Springs. We have some video of that apartment. Sources say that all of this information was very helpful. They also interviewed a man named Charles Voss, who housed Atta, and another man, Marwan al-Sheikhi. Charles Voss says that they attended this. Let's hear from him.
They arrived over there a year ago. It was in last July, and when they first arrived, they had no place to stay. They just popped in pretty much, as I recall, unannounced, and so we provided them for the benefit of the flight school, provided them a place to stay for a few days.
Now, Huffman, now these two men attended a flight school, Huffman Aviation International. The director of that school says that FBI took records from the school on these two and other students. He also says that these two students attended the school from July to November of last year, and that after that flight school, they went to another. This shows great planning, Paula. Law enforcement sources say they believe these two men flew one of the two planes from Logan Airport. Remember, their connection was to that car at Logan Airport. The United or the American flight were the ones that flew out of Logan. They flew into the World Trade Center. Both of these men had pilot licenses that we have obtained copies of. The men carried passports from the United Arab Emirates, but officials in that country denied that they are citizens. Now, in addition, there was information gleaned from a car, a rental car, that was impounded in the Portland, Maine airport. This led police to two other brothers, Adnan Bukhari and Amir Bukhari, and also a neighbor. CNN's Susan Candiotti went inside Adnan Bukhari's house. The FBI documents left inside that house indicated, this is Adnan Bukhari, inside that house, those FBI documents indicated that federal authorities took computer records, credit card receipts, and other INS documents. Now, also next door to Mr. Bukhari lived another man that police believe could also have been one of the pilots. One of the things that the FBI said that they took was a rooms-to-go receipt. That actually indicated that Bukhari had, in fact, bought some furniture at Rooms to Go on Tuesday. So it may well be, while law enforcement had thought that he might have been one of the men, Adnan Bukhari, who flew the plane out of Logan, coming in from Portland, they now believe that perhaps he is not and is still at large. They will be seeking him, of course, as a material witness. They did take that receipt from Rooms to Go, and Susan Scandiotti has been in touch. Apparently, the Rooms to Go salesman got in touch with her, said he has spoken to the FBI, and they indicated that perhaps they are already in touch with Mr. Bukhari. He said that furniture was supposed to be sent to the port in Fort Lauderdale for shipment back to Saudi Arabia. Paula?
All right, Eileen, I know that you were busy working your contacts when I was interviewing Attorney General Ashcroft just about a half hour ago, and I asked him a question about a report in Time magazine this morning confirming the fact that at least 4 terrorist teams, and you've indicated this too, had a certified pilot with them, and that some of these pilots had flown for an airline in Saudi Arabia. And I asked him if those pilots were trained in the United States and Saudi Arabia, or Saudi Arabia, and he wouldn't answer that. Explain to us this morning why that is so sensitive.
Well, it is sensitive because, of course, they're also in touch with the Saudi government. Now, of course, you know that Osama bin Laden is originally a Saudi national. They would have to be checking what links there are to Saudi Arabia, but also perhaps to Saudi nationals that might be linked to Osama bin Laden. Now, our records also that we've obtained do indicate that the two men, Adnan and Amir Bukhari, those two brothers that you saw earlier, the pictures of. Those two men did indicate that they had a post office box in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and that it was a post office box with Saudi Airlines. They also described themselves to neighbors that we have spoken to as Saudi pilots, and we do know that they did receive training here in the United States in Vero Beach at Flight Safety International. FBI have been to Flight Safety International, and they are, of course, looking into them and to others that may have trained there. Also, Paula, they are looking into men connected with these men. They're looking through all of these records, and I am told by a law enforcement source that they are also looking at some other flight schools in Florida. So they believe that there are, of course, other pilots out there that would have flown those two airliners from Dulles and also from Newark, and they may all be connected. Paula?
The other piece of information that CNN has gotten that the Attorney General wouldn't comment on is something that you and I talked about in the last hour, which is the possibility that members of each of these hijacking teams may not even have known each other prior to commandeering the jet. I guess part of the motivation for that would be if they were to be captured or interrogated, they wouldn't have to betray the whole operation. Any new information on that?
No, my sources are just indicating that they are working increasingly under the indication that that is likely the case, that the pilots may well have known each other. Then probably there were two pilots for each of those flights, may well have known each other, but then they wouldn't have known the other three, and the other three wouldn't necessarily have known the pilots or even each other, but that there was some kind of overt signal they all followed.
All right, Eileen, thanks so much for that update. We're going to head back to Atlanta, where Miles is standing by. Miles?
Paula, a little bit of breaking news coming into us just now. An Amtrak train and a freight train have collided just within about 45 minutes, about an hour ago, in Utah, in western Utah, in Tuella County. Tuella County Sheriff's Office indicating that the collision occurred and that there were, according to our affiliate there, KSL, 200 to 300 passengers on board that Amtrak train. There are reports, according to KSL, that at least one or two of those Amtrak cars is on fire. We are obviously trying to button this up, get some details for you as quickly as they become available. Just to recap, at 7:15 Eastern Time, 5:15 local time, an Amtrak train and a freight train collided in western Utah in Wendover. The county is Tuella County. The authorities there are responding to the scene there. 200 to 300 passengers on board that Amtrak train. We are working diligently to get details for you as soon as they become available. Send it back to Paula in New York.
For guests. All right, we're back here in New York City, and one of the things I think the nation is fascinated by right now is exactly what rescue workers are up against downtown as they try to start to dig through the tons and tons of rubble. Behind my shoulder, of course, you still see smoke coming from that area. Not far from there is Martin Savage, one of our correspondents, who's going to give us an update now on exactly what is going on down there. Martin?
Morning to you, Paula. And as you see quite clearly on the Manhattan skyline, it is still that plume of smoke that continues to rise where once the Twin Towers were rising themselves into the sky. It continues to be that sort of grayish, white-type cloud. It is fire that is still down there and smoke that is billowing up. The wind has shifted somewhat. That has eased the burden on the rescuers down there, but it has made it problematic for other people in lower Manhattan. Anyone with respiratory problems in the area are said that they should close their windows and should not come down here. As for the rescuers themselves, we were watching as a fresh load of rescuers came into the area. They're riding in buses. They're sometimes riding on the backs of trucks, any mode of transportation that can bring them down the West Highway here to approach to the Twin Towers, or what remains of where the Twin Towers once stood. Here is the problem that they're up against. There are at least two buildings in the immediate area around the debris field here that are said to be in imminent danger of potential collapse. We had a partial collapse that took place yesterday afternoon of the 7 remaining stories of one of those grand towers. And there is at least 2 other buildings. One is the Liberty 1 area, and then there is another building that is known as Building 5. That is a problem, obviously, for the rescuers down there. They had to evacuate quite suddenly, quite quickly. It was almost a repeat of some of the scenes we had seen days before. They are carefully working their way through that debris. They're using shovels, they're using picks, they're using heavy earth-moving equipment, and at times they're using their bare hands. The daylight now has supplanted the floodlights that bathe the area throughout the nighttime hours. They are searching for life, but many of them know that they are preparing to find death. As you point out, the number of body bags now requested by the city of New York has doubled to about 10,000. They have officially now found 160 bodies, but of course that death toll is going to go way beyond those numbers that have been found. So the desperate work is continuing. They are bringing in more equipment and they are taking out more debris. But they also know that with each passing hour and literally each passing moment, hope of finding more survivors grows dimmer and dimmer, but that hope still exists. Paula?
Martin, there was a lot of talk yesterday by FEMA and by other organizations across the country talking about sending in these specialized urban rescue teams. Can you give us an idea this morning on exactly how they are adding to the efforts already underway down there?
Well, the specialized teams obviously do the heavy lifting as far as trying to find those that may still be trapped inside. They're the ones that are dispatched to any indication if there is life to be heard from down underground. They're the ones that have the training, they're the ones that have the equipment and the expertise. The other volunteers that come in are doing also the heavy work, helping to clear the debris so that the specialized teams can have access to these specific areas. There are also a lot of firefighters that are down there doing their job, also assisting these teams. So basically it is those teams that are working at the point when it comes to trying to find survivors. It is the many thousands of other volunteers that are doing the heavy work of trying to clear the way for them to do their job. Paula?
I know Americans stand in awe of these rescue workers and firefighters and police, all of whom are risking their lives to assist in this effort. But what are and I know none of these folks involved will ever admit the grave dangers they're facing, but today, what is the biggest challenge they face in terms of their own personal safety?
It's the shifting debris. It is the concern about the buildings in the surrounding area that are known to be buckling. We know that the fires have weakened them severely, and that is the greatest danger. But they go about the job of digging into the ground, even though the threat may be above their heads. They are concerned about finding anyone who is alive. They are leaving it up to the other experts in the area to sort of watch over them. The tremendous strain that is building up on these rescuers is very evident as you talk to all of them. You talk to some of the first responding firefighters, and the tales that they tell you of the destruction, of the human destruction that they found, are just mind-numbing. They said that they never expected to see some of the scenes that they came across. One firefighter saying that when they initially entered one of the towers, they had to obviously go in through the lobby. What they saw goes beyond human decency to describe, but there was a tremendous number of burned victims on the ground floor that initially surprised them. They expected to find the burned victims up where the two planes impacted. Instead, what they found was that the fuel and the fire from those aircraft immediately dumped down the elevator shafts and exploded into the lobbies. That's the sort of thing they're up against, Paula.
Cannot even imagine of what they face. Martin Savage, thanks so much for that update. We're going to come back to you a little bit later on in this morning. Joining me right here, north of where Martin was just talking from, is Ron Saladino, who works for Solomon Smith Barney.
Yes.
Welcome. Tell us where you were when both of the World Trade Centers were struck.
I was on the 28th floor of number 7 World Trade, working in the southeastern corner.
Okay, now for folks who aren't familiar with New York, building number 7, or number 7, was in fact the building that collapsed much later in the day.
Yes, around 6 yesterday evening.
Did you see either one of these planes slamming into the North Tower or South Tower?
No, I didn't see any of the planes.
What did you hear?
At around 8:40, you heard a tremendous explosion, followed by what felt like an earthquake rumble. After that, immediately we looked towards the southern window and saw debris of building parts, glass, and metal shattered to the ground.
And what did you do?
At first, I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I had maybe one breath of air in the whole action. Dashed to the window, looked up, and saw a hole as wide as the World Trade Center, about 20 to 30 stories high, with flames pouring out of every end.
Everybody has had a different description of then, how they reacted to that. Did you think you were doomed?
At that point, I didn't know what to think. I was scared for my life. It's something you hear about in other countries, but you don't really know what it feels like till it actually happens, in the city you work, in the building right next to yours.
So tell us what happened from that point on.
From that point on, everyone seemed to be in awe, just staring at the giant hole in the Northern World Trade Center. We seemed to see bodies fly out of the window minute after minute in free fall, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 seconds down to the death at the bottom.
Some of those folks were jumping from the windows because they were trapped. Some of them just forced out by the pressure of the explosion. So you're watching this from the window. You're not thinking, I'm going to get out of this building because this building, if one of these other ones collapses, is going to be a gun or two.
At first,
are you surprised that you stood there and watched this thing rather than say, hey, I'm getting out of here?
Well, looking back at it now, it was just a blur in my memory. Eventually, someone did say, let's evacuate and let's get downstairs. And initially, once that clicked in my head, I knew to, run to the stairs and run downstairs as quickly as possible.
How long did it take you to get out of your building?
About 2 minutes. I must have ran down the stairs as fast as possible.
Yeah, we need to explain that building was only how many stories?
48, I think, in total, maybe 47.
I say only. I mean, that's a massive building by anybody's standards anywhere else in the United States. But the other buildings dwarfed it. They were 107 stories. The most remarkable thing is hearing some of your colleagues across the street describing trying to get out of the North Tower and it taking over an hour to get out.
Yes.
Once you got to the street, what happened? Were you pelted with flying debris?
Well, initially when I got down to the ground floor, the second plane had hit the Southern World Trade Center. And again, people started to panic, people started to cry, people started to get away from the front lobby windows. After that, security guards then pushed people down the escalator, around the back entrance and up towards Greenwich Street, getting people as north as possible away from the incident.
And once again, a lot of folks might not be familiar with the geography of the city, but once you arrived at Greenwich Street, which is not too far from there, did you see either one of the buildings collapse?
Yes, I did. About 10 to 20 blocks up, I stopped to catch my breath. I turned and looked around. The Southern World Trade Center began to just buckle, about 50 consecutive bangs, and it fell down like a waterfall. And after that, there was chaos in the streets. People didn't know what to believe.
Were people screaming? What were they
people
doing?
were crying. People were saying the city's under attack. People were mentioning that the Pentagon got hit by a plane also. I mean, that's when I almost started to get really upset.
You know what is fascinating to me is one of our previous guests was describing trying to get out from the midsection of the North Tower, and he said people were quite orderly. I mean, some of whom had been through the '93 World Trade Center bombing. That there was not a sense of panic until they got to the lower floors. And Martin Savage was just reporting about all the kerosene that firefighters were surprised to burn a number of victims on the lower floors, but they were inundated with water. A lot of the sprinklers had gone on the building, and that was the point at which I think people realized they were in trouble. Martin, I'm going to ask you to assist me here. This is really quite stunning to share with folks that are joining us right now. These are pieces of paper from Cantor Fitzgerald, which I'm going to have you hold this from the brokerage firm. Singed, I don't know if the camera could pick this up, but singed pieces of paper that were blown out of the wreckage of the World Trade Center. And these actually showed up in the yard of one of our correspondents, Peter Stiles. I am told out in Brooklyn. So this stuff ended up miles and miles away. What do you know about the safety of any of your friends that have worked in the other two buildings? Are you missing friends at this point, missing colleagues?
As of now, I had no friends or coworkers who worked in number 1 and 2. There actually was an individual who worked on my floor that was hurt. He actually fell and broke his leg, but I found out that he's safe and okay with family and friends. So everyone else who I know of is safe.
You're a very lucky man, and I hope that ultimately you can erase some of these horrific images that you've shared with us this morning. Thank you, Ron Saladino.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Time to go back to Atlanta. Miles is standing by with some more news.
All right, thank you very much, Paula. Let's turn our sights on Washington for a little bit. The U.S. Capitol. Minority Leader Dick Gephardt is standing by to talk a little bit about what's ahead in Congress as the discussion shifts to some tough talk, the possibility of retaliation. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Gephardt.
Thank you.
All right, first of all, give us a sense of the debate over any sort of resolution and the wording of a resolution. I hesitate to call it a declaration of war. I presume you would too. What would you call it?
Well, I think it's an authorization for the president to do what is necessary to both find and punish the perpetrators of this violence and to try to prevent other acts from happening in the future. The president is asking for authority, and I think the president will get proper authority. We're going to be talking to his people today about how to word it properly, but I think it is needed and it will be done.
These are the sorts of occasions when partisan rancor is put to the side, but nevertheless, there are some people who, with good intentions, could have some debate about how to phrase this resolution. What are the substantive issues which may divide the parties on this?
Well, there are all kinds of arcane issues about how to word it, but essentially I don't think it's going to be a problem. Look, this was the worst violence on our soil by a foreign influence or power in the history of the country. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This country is united today. The Congress is united. There is no air or light between Democrats and Republicans, between the Congress and the President. We want to respond. This was an act against humanity, against civilization, against all Americans. And America, as it always has, will respond. We are moved by what the heroic, patriotic people are doing, sifting through this wreckage, trying to find people. We have all kinds of reports of heroism and courage, and America will stand behind our people and stand behind the entire world order.
You know, you mentioned a foreign power is the cause of it. You would have to go back to the Civil War to find greater loss of life on the U.S. soil, which leads one to believe, of course, if we can recover from the Civil War, we can well recover from this. Let's talk about short-term for just a moment. There is talk of an emergency spending resolution, perhaps on the order of $20 billion. This comes right on the heels of a discussion about the budget and some concerns about tapping into Social Security, for example. Is there some concern that this whole issue might change the whole tenor of a budget discussion in the future?
Well, I really think this is a special exception. This is a national emergency. This is a national crisis. And we cannot worry about what the budgetary costs. We have to get this done. So I think Congress will put this to the side, will say this is not in the normal budgetary debate or discussion, and we're going to do what needs to be done. Again, there is unity in this country, in the Congress, and among the people of our country. Just as after Pearl Harbor, we stood together and fought a common enemy, that's what we're going to do at this time.
Looking back on your congressional tenure, perhaps the only parallel would be the Persian Gulf War. Can you compare the tone of the times then and the rhetoric then to today? Is there any substantive difference, or do you see it as very similar?
Well, I think it is different. I think the amount of unity from the outset is greater. We had a real discussion and a legitimate debate before the Persian Gulf War. There were those of us who were willing to use force, but we didn't think that was the right time to go at it. And we wanted to use diplomatic measures to try to achieve the end. So there was a difference of opinion. After we voted and the Congress decided to use force, there was absolutely no dissent. We stood shoulder to shoulder. But that's where we are now at the outset. There is no real criticism of moving forward, of finding the people who perpetrated this, trying to prevent it from ever happening again, and finding and bringing to justice the people who perpetrated this atrocity.
The House Minority Leader is Richard Gephardt. Thank you very much for sharing some time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Paula.
All right, Miles, I'm back here in New York City, and joining me now is Pat Probert, that is, who is joining us from Toronto this morning. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Pat, this is one of the more bizarre stories I've heard to come out of this. Explain to us your, in any way, attachment to this World Trade Center disaster. I understand you got a very strange email?
No, it was actually a call on my pager last night at 10:12 p.m. I went to bed about 9:45, listening to some of the news, and kind of fell asleep, and about 10:30 turned my TV off, and then heard my pager going off, and thought it was my brother Joe calling from Vancouver, as he did the night before at home, and I thought maybe instead of him calling tonight, being last night, he may have just paged me to call him back the next day. I called in, I heard this message, and it says, you know, we're under the rubble, we are okay, and it went on and then just ended. And I tried to go back to sleep, couldn't sleep. I got up, I listened to it 2-3 more times, Tried to sleep again. I couldn't. I phoned the police. I waited for them to answer their phones. I guess they were busy. I didn't call on the 911 line. So I hung up and went back to sleep. I still couldn't sleep, and I listened to it again. I phoned the Metro Toronto Police, got through to them, spoke to a sergeant at headquarters. He listened to it. Others listened to it. They sent police officers to my home last night to hear the tape, and they reviewed it. And he was on the line immediately with AT&T in the United States to try and track the phone number that came back to my pager last night. And you know, it was obviously very, very distressful and very, very sad and disturbing. It's been a long, long night for me.
I can't even begin to understand what that must have been like. Pat, for our viewers to get a better sense of why this was so disturbing, I think we're able now to play part of that message that was transmitted to you. Let's listen.
We're still alive. There's no trapped on the Rumble app, but we're still alive. There's no.
Pat, about the only thing I could make out, because the sound was a little distorted, is I'm still alive, I'm still alive.
Yes, we are trapped under the rebel. And then he goes to we are still alive, and then goes on from that point. He sounded very calm, cool, collected, didn't sound like he was stressed. You know, kind of seems like maybe he's in a good protected area and a void in there, but there's definitely, because he changed it from to we, that there's more than one person in here, and obviously they are alive. And hopefully they can, you know, try and track this down through AT&T and find out who it was, or if somebody in the United States hears that voice, maybe it's one of their loved ones hears it and knows that that's his voice, that maybe they can get a cell phone and try calling him. We're really hoping.
That is absolutely amazing. Now, do you have any idea how your pager would have been run?
Well, Toronto,
how this number, you know, would have been accessible to somebody, or is it a common number that someone could have dialed?
Yeah, Toronto has a 416 area code. New York has 516. Upstate New York has 716. And the last four digits of my number is all the same. And it's a very easy first three numbers of it as well. I do business in New York, in New Jersey, around the world, and you know, I don't know, there's a lot of Canadians down there. I don't know if somebody was actually had my number, or if a business associate had called me on my pager and hit redial, as you know, somebody here might have suggested or something, or they just dialed at random last night. But you know, in speaking with the police and everything, and there are people that heard this.
All right, we've lost our signal with Pat. What an absolutely disturbing story. And Miles, I think it's important to point out that one of the heads of the fire chiefs organizations that represents firefighters from all over the country told me yesterday that typically that 90% of the rescues that are done in these kinds of crisis situations, of course nothing compares to the magnitude of this, but most of the folks who are rescued alive are found within the first 24 hours. I am about to interview Mayor Giuliani, but I have been told by 2 or 3 rescue workers that they have not been given up hope. And if Pat Probert, if what he says, or we're led to believe from that exchange on the pager, is true, maybe indeed there are many people who are trapped inside these are what we're hoping to be safe pockets under this debris.
It's a chilling thought, and at the same time a somewhat, I guess, encouraging thought, isn't it?
Yeah, we hope.
All right.
We won't know for a while.
We'll check in with you in a little bit. Paul Lazan in New York. Just a quick little bookkeeping note for our viewers. 10 o'clock Eastern Time, an hour and a half from now, the Transportation Secretary, Norman Mineta, will be holding a news conference to officially announce what we reported to you just a little while ago, that essentially the nation's airspace will be reopened after an unprecedented 2-day shutdown at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. This will obviously be a gradual reopening. You need to be checking with your airline before you make any moves toward the airport. And even if you have a flight that is operating, allow yourself plenty of time for several additional layers of security measures which have been added on in the wake of this unprecedented attack. One other little note for you. The Pentagon today, we're still trying to assess the damage and the loss there. The indications we have right now, despite some high numbers which came out yesterday, are that approximately 100 to 150 people are unaccounted for in the wake of the 757, American Airlines 77, crashing at the edge of one of the so-called wedges there. We're told that the bodies, as is the custom and the procedure in the military, will be airlifted fairly shortly to the Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, where the military handles processing of remains of military personnel. We'll be watching that as well. At the White House, Kelly Wallace is on the North Lawn, giving us a sense of what the president is up to today. Obviously, more consultations with the national security team, more consideration of the options that lie ahead. Some of them grim options, right, Kelly?
Well, certainly this whole situation very grim and very difficult for this administration, Miles. What we are seeing the president and his top team do, though, is try to build, in their words, an international coalition against terrorism. And that is to continue today. Mr. Bush in the Oval Office shortly after 7 a.m., getting his normal national security and intelligence briefings. And then aides telling us that the president expected to be telephoning other world leaders and also to be talking to local officials in some of the areas affected, including certainly New York City. We know the President, Miles, was on the phone yesterday calling the leaders of Britain and France and Germany, Russia and China. And what you are seeing is this White House trying to get some international backing, potentially for whatever response this U.S. administration might decide to take, but even broader, an international backing for perhaps a worldwide fight against terrorism. We know the White House, Miles, was quite gratified by that statement coming out of NATO on Wednesday, that statement saying that an attack on one member of the alliance is the same as an attack on the entire alliance. And of course, in your interview with Congressman Gephardt, we certainly know this administration, White House officials have been talking with U.S. lawmakers, trying to work on the language of a possible congressional resolution which would allow or give the authority for the U.S. to retaliate for these deadly terrorist attacks. We also know, Miles, certainly that the White House continuing to talk to lawmakers about an emergency spending bill, as much as $20 billion to go ahead and pay for search and rescue efforts, as well as the investigation and the rebuilding efforts in the cities involved. So potentially other meetings with congressional leaders. President working the phones, though, again, trying to build international support. U.S. officials, Miles, as you certainly very well know, publicly not at all speculating or talking about any response this White House might take or when that response could come. Privately, though, some U.S. officials telling CNN that the administration in the president's national security meetings yesterday at least beginning discussion of possible U.S. responses, possible steps the administration could take. Miles, back to you.
Well, Kelly, before you get away, they don't call it the World Trade Center for nothing. There are reports this morning that 100 British nationals, 75 Australians, 100 Japanese nationals, 27 Koreans, we could go down the list,
absolutely,
are missing in the wake of these attacks. And I presume that makes it a little easier to build this coalition.
It certainly does. I mean, when you do see these other countries involved losing citizens from those countries, it does make it easier. Obviously, you have heard world leader after world leader come out and condemn the violence and the terrorism, saying that that country is standing directly side by side with the U.S. You've heard the Prime Minister of Great Britain. You've had the Australian Prime Minister, who happened to be in Washington, I believe, earlier in the week, coming out on the floor at the Capitol, pledging to cooperate and work with the U.S. So that does make it easier. And again, one question we've been asking U.S. officials is, does the U.S., is it looking for any kind of tangible support, actual military support, perhaps from other nations, when and if the U.S. decides to retaliate? U.S. officials publicly and really even privately not sort of speculating about that. But clearly you are seeing this White House trying to build some coalition, some backing for any steps it takes in the immediate future, and then maybe for a long-term fight, again, against terrorism. Miles?
Well, and certainly there would be a tremendous amount of symbolism should it be, for example, a NATO attack when and if that were to occur. But you get the sense that given the drama here and given the extent of the casualties, that really all bets are off in a sense. There are no constraints really as far as potential reprisals. The White House it doesn't need to be bridled in any way. Do you get that sense there?
Well, certainly, and I thought your interview with Congressman Gephardt quite telling, how you asked him that great question, I thought, about the comparison with the 1991 situation, Congress having to come forward, deciding on a resolution to give Mr. Bush's father the go-ahead for using force against Iraq when the Iraqis invaded Kuwait. Congressman Gephardt saying there's really no division here, no controversy here. Democrats, Republicans united, definitely standing together. Obviously, there is pressure on the administration to respond. You've been reporting the American people very, very angry. But, Miles, this administration, wants to certainly get the facts, get a case together, make sure it gets the right people. Also make sure whatever steps it takes, it can sort of knock out that organization or organizations or whatever it is so that those groups can't attack again. And then there is this sort of longer concern to try to somehow convey to the American people that the White House, the administration, that these organizations have taken steps so that something like this could never happen again. That's obviously the big hurdle for this White House.
Kelly, what about the timing, though? Is there a sense that there is a window of opportunity that is open now for a reprisal, and at a certain point in time it becomes too late to do that? In other words, the coalition might become frayed at the edges?
Well, that's a good question. You have heard a lot of people talking about the tremendous anger on the streets of New York City, certainly in Washington, all around the country. Anger for retaliation, for the administration to do something, to a show of force, really, because of the magnitude of the destruction and the tragedy. So there seems to be certainly growing pressure for the administration to act quickly. You get the sense that the president, he is certainly known as a decisive leader who certainly wants to, once he makes a decision, go forward and go forward quickly. But at the same time, if you look at the language the president has used, the Secretary of Defense, they sort of make the case that this can be a maybe sustained or prolonged battle. The president saying that the battle will take time and resolve, but in the end, we will win. So you get the sense that while there's pressure to act quickly, and while maybe the U.S. could be planning to act quickly, that as well U.S. leaders kind of making the case in the U.S. for a maybe longer-term battle, again, against terrorism around the world.
CNN's Kelly Wallace at the White House, keeping us posted. We will, of course, be checking in with her as our continuing coverage presses on. We're now approaching the 48-hour mark since that first attack on the first tower of the World Trade Center. In about an hour and 20 minutes' time, we should be hearing from the Secretary of Transportation to confirm what we have been reporting this morning, that at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, the nation's air traffic system will resume operations, albeit gradually, albeit somewhat constrained, but nevertheless, at 11 a.m., the skies will be reopened after an unprecedented, nearly 48-hour closure of airspace over the United States. Let's send it back to Paula in New York.
And Miles, you just mentioned that 48-hour mark. At this point, it is beginning to look like a more typical workday here in New York City. We're going to show you a shot now of what the area continues to look like downtown, where smoke is still billowing from what is left of the World Trade Center bombing. I might have mentioned earlier the winds have shifted, so a lot of New Yorkers who never smelled this stuff before are smelling it this morning. It's a stinging, acrid smoke. Rescuers working against the clock here, trying to dig through tons and tons of rubble. And in fact, in one of the most astonishing stories we've heard here today, there seems to be an indication there are people still trapped inside this rubble. A man named Pat Probert, who just joined us from Toronto, explained that last night he got a page on his pager. He punched in his codes, went to listen to the message. It was a message from someone trapped inside the rubble, someone saying, first of all, I am alive, and then indicating we are alive. Pat Probert was so shattered by what he heard, he listened to the message over and over again, called authorities in Toronto, who then engaged some U.S. authorities. They're investigating this call. They're trying to get AT&T to try to do some work to track down the number of who was calling them, to perhaps try to figure out the identity of that caller. So that is a bit of encouraging news, even though 12 hours has passed since that page. The mayor of New York City saying that These rescue workers are going to stay in these incredibly challenging situations for many days to come in hopes of getting to these folks. We should mention yesterday that it is quite miraculous that these search and rescue teams actually got to 11 people, 6 firefighters, 3 police officers, 2 civilians. And rescued them from the rubble. You were looking at the area around a building called One Liberty Plaza, familiar to New Yorkers here. It actually houses NASDAQ's new headquarters. You know, you got to understand, because no one can really get into this area, it's very hard to accurately report what's going on. But for a large part of yesterday, most journalists were reporting that this 54-story building was in danger of collapsing. The mayor confirming today it did not collapse. It was not a secondary collapse. Those are his exact words. The management of the building saying that the building has not sustained any structural damage and there are no issues with the building at the current time, which is good news. However, there are 100 buildings in the area surrounding this that are in not very good shape. The mayor confirming this morning that the Millennium Hotel, some of you who visited New York may know that hotel. He reiterated something to clarify this. Millennium Hotel is okay. There might be another hotel that is in greater danger of having some problems. Just a quick recap of what New Yorkers are dealing with this morning. New York public schools are open, parochial schools open for the most part. The public schools did open late today to give teachers and counselors a time to sit down and figure out what they are going to tell students about this attack here in New York City. The major exchanges may open as early as tomorrow. If that doesn't happen, they will open on Monday. And the reason why it's difficult to get these businesses open south of 14th Street is that it is very difficult to get south of here. There's a street called the West Side Highway that has been set up as a staging area for all these search and rescue teams that are coming to town to assist in these efforts. The mayor is saying this morning that they hope to open up some of these corridors heading south to Wall Street in anticipation of the exchanges opening again tomorrow. Once again, the numbers continue to be disturbing. The medical examiner of New York City saying they now have 500 body bags on hand, that they have ordered at least 5,000 more that are on the way. We can tell you this morning, and we can confirm this now because the mayor's confirming it, 300 firefighters missing, 30 police officers missing, and about 30 Port Authority police officers missing. And Miles, the most disturbing statistic of all, and this is the first time the mayor has been saying this, is that 3,700 people are known to be missing.
All right, thank you very much, Paula. We're going to turn it over to Staten Island, New York, not far from where Paula is standing right now. CNN's Hillary Lane is there with some information on the phone with us from there, some information about what is going on there. Hillary?
Good morning. What is happening here is that they have shut down Staten Island. Port Authority police are telling us this morning there is no way anyone will get on the island, and they are not allowing cars off the island at this point. From New York or New Jersey, there are about 4 entrances to Staten Island, which is one of the 5 New York City boroughs. All of those bridges have been closed at this point. The Staten Island Ferry, which ran from downtown Manhattan, obviously is not in service as well. They will not confirm what is going on Staten Island at this point. They said they are moving emergency personnel in, conducting some sort of an investigation, but Police Officer Hughes of the Port Authority Police will not tell us why. He's only saying that Staten Island has been shut down at this point. Back to you.
Hillary, just to confirm, Staten Island has been the site of a repository for much of the rubble from the collapse of the World Trade Center. Is there some linkage there?
I cannot tell you this at this point. The only thing they're telling us is that they're moving emergency personnel in. There was a good deal of police activity at the Outer Bridge crossings where we tried to enter from the southern tip. Our producer, Vito Maggiolo, is trying to make it in from the Goethals Bridge from the New Jersey side. He has been shut off as well and says it does not look like they are letting anybody off. Earlier today, he thought there was one lane of one bridge open and that they were letting cars go by, but apparently that has been stopped as well.
And have you been told to evacuate the area or just stay put then, Hillary?
We were not allowed to go onto the island at all. They were moving all cars out of the way, so they said they could move in police personnel from the New Jersey police and from the Port Authority police. But like I said, nobody is allowed to go onto Staten Island at this point, and it does not appear like they're letting anybody exit the island as well.
Hillary and Miles, I'd love to jump in here because this brings to mind something that happened during the 10 o'clock hour of our broadcast last night when we were told the Empire State Building was being evacuated and Penn Station was being evacuated. It turns out there was nothing to whatever threats were made there. So Hillary, I guess one of the things we're going to have to continue to live with perhaps is fake threats in some of these areas. I know we don't know enough at this point to say that. I just wanted to interject that because I think was
that's
scary
absolutely right.
for a number of us last night.
I think it's a case of, take every precaution at this point. Don't let anything go by. And in the case of a borough like Staten Island, which is accessible only by bridge at this point, it is a very easy area to cordon off should that be the case. And so I think police have moved in this morning working on whatever information they are and taking every precaution that they can. And in this case, they are able to block off, to entirely cordon off the island.
Okay, Miles, I don't know if you want to carry on here.
All right, thank you very much, Paula. As a matter of fact, we're going to keep it in New York. Let's move along to the hospitals, a scene of a real wrenching emotion as medical personnel try to care for tremendous numbers of severely wounded people. Brian Palmer has been at St. Vincent's Hospital, along with the fatigued staff there, trying to keep us updated. What do you know, Brian?
Exactly. Well, we've seen a trickle of ambulances arrive here at St. Vincent's Hospital Medical Center. Actually, under a dozen volunteer. There was a volunteer police officer who was just treated, and emergency services vehicle going back past. This is one of the main arteries south to the blast site. But Paula said before, a largely typical scene in New York, but that's largely above 14th Street. Below 14th Street, where we are, there's a state of emergency. The streets have been shut down to anything other than authorized vehicles, emergency services vehicles, which is kind of eerie. This is one of the most vibrant parts of New York, with New York University and the Parsons School of Design in Greenwich Village and the legendary jazz clubs. People are waking up, but the scene is a bit subdued. Now, here at St. Vincent's, they had set up a treatment area outside of the hospital. They've actually taken that down and moved things back inside as sort of a sign that things are returning to normalcy, but also a sign that they're not receiving the numbers that they expected. Miles?
Brian, if you would you mind sort of taking off the electronic blinders, if you will, and pan the camera around so we can sort of set the scene? You sort of referred to it, and just describe what you're seeing there as you stand in the midst of all of this.
Well, what we're seeing now outside of St. Vincent's is really a press vigil, but we've also seen some family members who've come by to talk to the press, family members of people who are still missing. But you see a scrum of just press waiting for the latest information from St. Vincent's spokespeople. They were holding regularly scheduled press conferences, but what they've told us now is that they're going to speak to us when they have new information. What they have told us is that they're going to try and set up a website which would have patient names. The catch there is that they need to get the permission from all these patients, over 400 patients, before they can post that. But they're working in cooperation with the city's Office of Emergency Management to do that.
Brian, we've heard these tragic stories about family members looking for missing relatives who might or might not be in hospitals, might or might not be identified. How many of those have you seen? Are there quite a few in numbers?
Well, we haven't seen too many of those here yet. We've been here about 2 or 3 hours, but we have seen some people here who have actually taken their case directly to the media, and they're talking to people here and trying to get their stories out. Miles?
CNN's Brian Palmer maintaining a vigil at St. Vincent's Hospital in Manhattan. Let's go back to Paula.
You know, Miles, I'd love to stay with you for a second. The one thing that none of us has addressed, I think because the markets continue to be closed, is what the impact of this horrible tragedy is going to have on markets. We know all the major brokerage houses are closed. We don't know, how that's going to affect people's individual accounts. And right now I'm going to check in with a man, Michael Farr, who I think can give us all a better sense of what broader picture of what impact this might all have on the fleet economy. Mr. Michael Farr, thank you so much for joining us today. Let me see if I have this correct. You're with Farr, Miller, and Washington. What is that?
We're a money management firm here in Washington, D.C. We manage individual accounts and institutional accounts.
All right. I think almost everyone that we have talked to or seen as quoted would acknowledge that this is going to certainly add instability to an already weakening economy. How much instability?
Well, that's the big question. We really don't know. We do know that Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan has said that he and the Federal Reserve are at the ready to supply whatever liquidity is necessary to maintain order and stability in the financial markets. We've also seen G7 leaders come up with the same pledge of liquidity, and in fact a great deal of liquidity was applied yesterday. So when we have seen periods like this in our nation's history of catastrophe, including Pearl Harbor, including the attack in 1993 at the World Trade Center, Desert Storm and the Gulf War, there is a period of instability, and then some 6 months later, on average, we see markets trading higher by about 11%, and 12 months out, markets are some 18% higher. The American markets are some of the of course, best and finest in the world, largest in the world, and bringing them back to order so that we can begin to get back to some sort of business again will happen. This time, amount of time that it takes to happen is really what's in question. And I think, so much of the infrastructure of the markets at the various firms and World Trade Center, so many of our friends, Wall Street's a place of relationships. And we all know people that were there, and we're grieving for them. We're all walking around a little bit numb, knowing how important and vital it is that we get back to the business of America's business.
Michael, you brought up a couple of those other crises. How critical or how relevant is it that this is the first crisis, other than the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, that has happened in the financial heart of a city?
Well, I think that it is certainly significant, again, because Wall Street is a place of relationships. Business is done still just by a person's word, frequently over the telephone, based on relationships that we've built. Now, the data, the real backbone of what happened in the World Trade Center in terms of records and papers and that sort of thing, are all held in off-site, or replicated in off-site storage centers, data storage centers away from Manhattan. So the skeleton and the architecture of the markets is still there, ready to come back in place. The minds, the experience, the expertise, the brilliance that was housed in those buildings, the relationships that were so essential to getting business done, have tragically been lost, and we need to rebuild ways to add some meat back on the infrastructure to get business resumed on Wall Street.
Michael, need a real brief answer to this one. We're talking, there's talk that a spending bill of some $20 billion will end up at the president's desk sometime today. Is that drop in a bucket, or is that something that also, at a time when people are worried about Social Security and some of the budget resolutions, might also have an impact on the economy?
I think that certainly it's a drop in the bucket, but it's an indicator of the support that's at the ready, and it won't be the last bit of support at the ready. I think that everyone's focused, everyone is joining together to get back to some normalcy and to make sure that America shows its resolve to move forward from this sort of great disaster. Though our hearts are certainly heavy, we forge ahead.
Okay, Michael Farr, thanks for your insights this morning. Back to Atlanta now, and Miles.
Thank you very much, Paula. In New York, after all, they invented the ticker tape parade. This is a city that is used to cheering on what it deems to be heroes. Through all of this terrible tragedy, a new kind of hero has emerged, and Jeannie Mose tells us about that.
We've seen the bad news over and over, from above, from below.
I hope I live. It's coming down on me.
The doctor holding this camera did live, and now New Yorkers are saying we will survive. Guys driving bulldozers are getting the red carpet treatment. Thank you! New Yorkers, who sometimes treat camouflage as a fashion statement, are cheering the military.
Thank you, guys! I was so touched
When I first came around the corner and saw what was happening, I kept having to fight back tears.
I've been mesmerized by watching this on TV, and I wanted to come out and show my support.
This woman used to have a view of the Twin Towers from her apartment. Now the skyline has too much sky.
It reminds me of when somebody loses their two front teeth or something, and there's this void, and you feel like something should be there, but it's not.
I woke up this morning and I made this T-shirt, and I thought, that's just not enough. What else can I do?
Luke Littell ended up making a big thank you sign. Soon others joined in. Firemen tend to be favorites. But folks even cheered Con Ed, a utility.
Probably the only time that we'll ever see Con Ed trucks applauded.
The crowd applauded trucks full of debris and ash.
You see these flowers?
Yep.
That's for every truck that goes by that has ashes in it, because in those ashes is someone's family's family.
Some folks choked back tears. Others vented their anger.
I'm mad. That's what I am. I'm a Vietnam veteran. Mr. Bush, put the bombers up in the air. Get him. Just get him. Get him. Get him. Get him.
Some would like to get the towers rebuilt.
You can hurt us, you can keep us down, but you can't keep us down forever. And I think the rebuild would be a symbol to the world that the human spirit is alive and well here.
The spirits of those involved in the rescue effort seemed raised by the reception.
I think the people are great.
A moving reception for those who move the earth. Jeannie Moe, CNN, New York.
All right, remarkable scenes of contrast in New York City in the wake of this terrible tragedy. Let's take a look at some live pictures. Baltimore Harbor, I believe, is the place we are moving to. This is the U.S. Naval Hospital ship Comfort. You're seeing a very close shot of it. There's the radar tower, the conning tower of this particular ship. It is in this harbor to bring supplies to aid and help in the recovery in New York City.